dear friends. Delighted to see you back after lunch. We have an almost full room, and I'd like to thank Martin for being with us. I don't think that Martin needs an introduction. Actually, I need an introduction. I'm the person standing next to Martin. So thank you to everybody, and Martin, thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Nicholas. And the title that I'm talking to today was Nicholas's idea, actually, navigating the supercycle. I haven't been doing that many cycles lately, but it's always a good topic. And in the course of going through it, I actually discovered that I have been through a whole supercycle backwards. And I'll show you later on how that happened, but it's been very interesting doing the sort of slides that I'm going to show you now. I prepared over the last week or so, and I think it's certainly helped me to think about what's going on and what's coming in the future, and I hope that you'll take the spirit of the thing and understand, or it will provide a bit of context for this very difficult question as to what happens next. I mean, Chris Wernicke made some very good sort of opening comments, as far as I'm concerned, about the whole question of safety technology and making the operational side of the business work in a more effective way. And I think that for companies, and this is very much the way we need to go. So I'm going to talk about, I'm sure I can carry this thing around, never mind. I'm going to talk about what oops, a daisy, nope, that was the wrong supercycle. Here we go. What are shipping supercycles? Are we in one now? Where is it going? What can companies do about it? I've got 13 minutes to do that, so I'm not going to hang around. Of course, supercycles are just like big motorcycles. They're a bigger version of the real thing. The cycles that we're all very familiar with, the short shipping cycle that we all, everyone in this room has sort of, we trudge through them. And the point about the short cycles is that they are really managing ships. You're deciding where ships trade, how fast they go, how much they get paid. When you get to the supercycle, it's partly about the technology of ships, the way the ships are ordered, structured, and the longer term issues, but it's also the real pawns in the process are the companies, because the supercycles are about, if you like, herding companies to get them to do what the market wants them to do, and that's the process. The function of the supercycles is to manage structural change. If you haven't got any structural change, you don't need a supercycle, because you just carry on as usual. And the question of how long they last, I'll show you some data about this, but I reckon the last one lasted 40 years. The one before that lasted much longer. So they don't have a specific length, but the last one it started out with 2 decades of very rapid growth. This is the last complete cycle. And then there was a shock, then there was a collapse, and then there was a correction period where the correction wasn't really about beating people up. It was about integrating all of the technology and stuff that had been developed on the way up and putting it to work in the hands of companies who were able to make it work. That's what happened. And that's what the adjustment phase is, a sort of shakedown where you, having got all these bits together, you then consolidate it into the people who are the companies that are really going to run the business. If that sounds a bit intellectual, one of the first supercycle I'm going to talk about was the cargo liner one, and at the end of it, virtually every company, when the next one went out of business. I mean, there was a total change of companies. So let's just move on, and we can take a look at what these supercycles are. This is nearly 300 years of freight rate data. The freight rate data doesn't tell the story very well, and I don't have enough data to really analyze it properly, but my first supercycle is this one, which is steamships, cargo liners, European trade. It was an era in itself. The Europeans around the world, they had liner companies, tramps were supporting them, and they carried all the passengers as well as all the cargo. And then we come to the next one, and this was the global revolution, which happened. Basically, there was a very long tail end to this first cycle because you were moving from the European hegemony to the Americans, and the Americans were very slow picking up the baton on this one. And it wasn't really until Bretton Woods in 1947 that they actually made the pace and they announced the global economy. And this cycle here was all about developing to the global economy as you built a whole new generation of ships. You moved to a transport system which was nothing to do with packing stuff into a hull. It was about bulk transport, bulk handling, containerization, really quite difficult things to do, extremely difficult things to do, and very expensive. And that period was, in fact, completed in about the middle of the 1980s. And then we move to the third cycle, which I reckon we're in the middle of at the moment. And that one started in the late 1990s. Now, you can't see the cycle very well from the freight rates, but a much better way of looking at it from your point of view, I would say, is in terms of shipbuilding data, because that's investment. This is the money. This tells us how much money the industry was putting down, and you see that, well, there's this sort of bunchy period. This is the run out from the end of the first cycle. It took a long time. The cargo liner growth phase really finished about, I would say, 1900. And after that, you were trying to shake the thing down and find a new modus operandi. And that's when, if, you know, the European leadership of the world economy was definitely in retreat, the Americans hadn't taken over, so you get this long period when it didn't work very well. And that was very much reflected. There's no pattern there. It just went on for about 30 or 40 years. Supercycle 2, nice, clear. You see the growth of investment starts 1950 after Bretton Woods, peaks out in 1973 when the whole commodity thing starts to change. You know, after 20 years of bringing in global commodities, the suppliers were starting to get frisky, if you want to use that word, and the whole dynamic changed. And so we moved from peak with a lot of investment into this, again, this post period of about 10 or 15 years where all the investment, you know, this is when the new VLCCs were scrapped. But the reason, that wasn't all negative. It was simply shaking everything down, sorting out what sort of companies you needed, having got the ships in place. I mean, this is all brand new ships, bulkers, tankers, gas ships, and we're just sort of a breather and sorting things out. And then we move into the present cycle, which starts again, and this is, of course, sitting behind it is another geopolitical change. China comes in, and you're also beginning to get a build-up of the digital stuff. And the other very crucial thing, I think, by 1990, the container business was mature, and it was right there at the right time for China. So you had proper global container services, which was probably the biggest single thing that happened, transformed the industry. And interestingly, those container services are now almost totally commoditized and extremely profitable for the first time. This is exactly the same shipbuilding data, but I put it on a log scale, which means a straight line means constant growth. And I think this shows the three cycles better. You see this, not much happening in the second half of Supercycle 1. You're just trying to sort it out. This is the 1930s recession. Then Supercycle 2, long growth as Europe and Japan sort out their economies, grow very rapidly, build all the bulk ships, develop the container business. And then another 10 to 15 years where not very much happens. And then we moved into Supercycle 3, and it's growing steadily until 2009. And now it's sort of, again, it's in this consolidation phase where it's not quite, and this has all been complicated by the much discussed issues this morning of the difficulties of what do you do about decarbonisation and all that stuff if the technology isn't there. And as we move forwards, Supercycle 3, how long is that going to go on, and how are we going to manage that? Well, this is my projection. It's not really, it's my base case that I developed I've been using the model for years. It has nothing very clever about it, but what it shows is this replacement peak building up in the 2030s, which is when the big investment takes place. Now, the thing that bothers me about this, is the technology going to be ready to do this by this time? And, one possibility is that it peaks in 2036. The other possibility is it peaks in 2046. And so what are you doing in the meantime? In this period, suppose this shifts forward 10 years. And we were caught out by this. I was using this chart along with people like Jarle Hammer in Norway in the late 1980s to show there was going to be a big bulge of replacement in the 90s. Never happened. All these ships that were supposed to get scrapped went on to 30 years, and they were scrapped in they all got scrapped in the run up to 2010, really. So that really is the question of what sort of, if we're talking about this as a super cycle, and this is having peaked out here, it's moving into a consolidation phase, but we've got this great snarl up on the technical side. So how is that going to get managed? Well, this is the scenario that I have been, I pull out of my model. It doesn't have much science behind it. What I do, though, is look at everything, the global demand for energy and everything else. And basically, it seems to me inevitable that you get some heavy fuel oil ships carrying on. Heavy fuel oil is great stuff. It really is. It's, you then move into this period where you would like to have green fuels, but all the signs are it's slipping. And when I came to plug this into my model, I just could not convince myself, this is before the recent slippages, that we were going to get all this, by 2035, you need all this amount of new green fuels. And I just couldn't believe that was going to happen. So I stuck in a lot of carbon capture, and I've been following the carbon capture very closely, and I think it's definitely a player in the game. There are some other things which are potential players, but carbon capture is a technology problem. It's like water ballast or sulfur scrubbers. If you put the work in, you might be able to resolve it. And so the big problem here is the timing of technology availability. You can put your dual fuel engine into the ship, you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. You've got to have the green fuel to use it. And it seems to me this is the challenge, is this timing phase, which all sounds a bit depressing, but you are not the first generation of shipping companies that couldn't sort this out. And I'm running out of time, but I wanted to show this chart I did exactly 40 years ago when I was in shipbuilding, and we had, from the 70s, the European shipbuilders had a forecasting group, and they made a forecast every year of world shipbuilding, future shipbuilding deliveries in compensated gross tons. And this is what actually happened. You see, this was the peak in 1975, and then it went down a bit, and in the end, it halved. We ended up with half. But if you look at the forecasts that were made starting in 1978, you can see this is absolutely how people saw the business at the time. In 1978, they thought that this was going to happen. So they were very depressed short term, and the idea was that it went down to this very low level, and then it came back. And it went back to where we started, because I think everybody assumes that you're not going to, absolute decline's impossible. So then we'd come to the next forecast they did, which was in June 1980. And by that time, we had had quite a good market in 1980. The bulker market was buzzing, and Aframaxes too. And so they've modified the downturn, and then it increases steadily, and it gets back to where we were in the mid-70s. Then the next one, things were not looking so good. You know, it comes down a bit and up. And finally, we are here in 1984. This is the 1984 forecast, and you see, they see it going down, but even to the bitter end, they still thought it would go back up to where it was in mid-70s, but it didn't. You know, so I think you should, I mean, I've had endless fun out of this chart, you know, it's been a goodie. I didn't, in 1984, you couldn't animate it like that. But what it really says is you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you're going to have to deal with it anyway. And that really puts the focus on the companies. And I think it seems to me, we're not really rocket scientists. Well, it seems to me that what every company needs to do is the sort of thing that Chris Wernicke was talking about this morning, is work on the company organization to make it capable of dealing with the changes. You're not going to predict them, but you need a company which can deal better with it than any of the other companies in your sector. And if you can do that, you're on a winner, and that's what the market long cycle wants to do. It wants to pull up the companies that can really manage their way through this change. So, in summary, Supercycles, big version of short cycles, manage structural change in maritime transport. So, and I think you would agree we've got structural change ahead of us today. 3 supercycles in the last 160 years. They do last a long time. And the current supercycle started in the early 1990s, so it's been chugging away for quite a long time. And I have to say, I told you, I've been through the cycle backwards. I started with the downturn from the 70s cycle, so I got the recession first, and then got, by great good fortune, was involved in the upswing that came later, which was a happy day. Next adjustment phase, the big issue is the peak going to be in 2036 or 2046. It doesn't really matter. You don't know. You won't know till it happens. You need a business that can move fast enough to deal with whatever technology as it develops. And the financing, of course. Complex mix of decarb, technical systems, and geopolitics. They're all there. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff sitting out there to make life very difficult. But difficulty is good. I always think I'd much rather have a business which is difficult to do, because you can build up some advantage, you know? And so I think you need to forget the superbike, although that was a Harley-Davidson electric bike that I had on the earlier slide, which they call it the Livewire. And I mean, it would be quite a good sort of bit of research if you could invest in one for the company to do some research on electric propulsion. You know, I'm sure that would be quite. It has all the problems. It's heavy. It has a range problem, etc. So this is the way. you don't really need a Harley Davidson. What you need is the skills to jump over things like this. And you don't know what they're going to be, but you can have a very good guess. So that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.